Okay, here we have Bob Bailey, Bob Bailey's Tr6, which is one of his creations for our cars, like the Scan Master G, Map Translator. Bob's mastermind, power logger behind all that stuff. I'm getting ready to put the Tr6 on Steve B's car. I had a request to do sort of kind of an install video, so I'm going to do that. First, let's just look at the Tr6 itself. This has all been documented before, but I'll go over it again. Here's the Tr6. This is with the truck coil, Equinox coil, Impala coil, whatever. Comes on a 3.5 and a 3.9 push rod front wheel drive motor, or 4.3 push rod rear wheel drive motor. Bolts to the plate. Okay. Here's the part number for it. I only recommend the Delco part number. I don't recommend anything aftermarket. Here's what happens when you take the lid off the Tr6 and you see you got all them switches in there. The ones that you are really concerned with is leave your config switches all to off, and your mode switches should be all off except for mode 4. That's because we're going to run waste spark. This is a waste spark. The coil fires, one coil fires 2 cylinders. If you're going to run 6 individual coils, which isn't covered in this video, it will be set to off, which would be mode 4 would be set to off, so they all would be off. Okay. Mode 1 is base timing mode, which is a really neat feature. You put it in mode 1 to on, and you can go down there to crank with your timing light, and you can check your actual mark on the balancer right here down on the timing index. And if it's off, you can plus or minus the injector off or the spark offset in your aftermarket ECU, or you can have your chip burner address that. Mode 3 is another cool one, which is cam sensor phasing, which uses a stock LED tachometer. 3000 is to where it should be. Slightly less than 3 is advanced. Slightly after 3 is retarded. The rest of these we don't really use. If I'm going to set the 2-step up, I will go ahead and use the trig function on the right. You can see this one is not being used right now. If it was to be used, I would flick a couple of those switches on, which right here, 5 and 6, it would be 3000 if it was being used. Then you have the rev limiter. Looks like the rev limiter on this one is set to about 6,000, and that will cut spark, not fuel, which is very much more advantageous than doing it the other way around. Okay, you also have to upgrade the fuse under the dash on the C3i model, which if you look up there, or excuse me, not C3i, CCCI model right there, it's a 10. I've already replaced it with a 25 amp. There's the 10 that's come out of it. Other than that, this installs just like the factory module. It's going to plug in and bolt up just like the factory module. Behind it, you have a little harness. The harness will snap in here. These wires here, I usually snip them short unless you're going to use the 2-step. If you're going to use 2-step, you're going to run one of them inside, which is the orange wire. The gray wire, I'm not exactly sure what that's for. I'd have to look it up. Inside the Tr6, there's your software update port, which usually you don't have to use. If you got one now, Bob's got all the updates out. That's pretty much what you got. Under it, you've got a ground that comes out of the harness. You can ground that to the engine. I ground it to the module, the box, and the bracket. The bracket grounds on the studs, and I go ahead and make another redundant ground, which will go to the engine. So I'm pretty much my bases covered there ground-wise. This is pretty much, if you have a car that's anything more than stock, the Tr6 takes out all the aftermarket ignition models that don't come up to par anymore with the subpar electrical components that are available today. If you have access to like NOS GM modules, those are good, but since there was a need, Bob has developed this. So there's a little basic overview of the Tr6 from my point of view. If you see anything I missed there, Mr. Bob, go ahead and correct me.